The first question comes from Force Zero, who asks, can you use a Ryzen 5 5600 paired with the RTX 4090? And before answering that question, if you want to get featured in the next Q&A, follow the instructions in the description. To answer the question shortly, yes, you can use a Ryzen 5 5600 with the RTX 4090. Now, should you do it? Probably not. And before explaining why you should not buy a Ryzen 5 5600 to pair with the RTX 4090, I want to say that in some games, there's actually no difference whether you have the best CPU or the Ryzen 5 5600 for a GPU like the RTX 4090. Like for example, Cyberpunk 2077 at 4K resolution ultra settings with ray tracing on, there's not going to be a CPU bottleneck there, or in a game like Forza Horizon Zero Dawn at 4K ultra preset. So of course, there are some cases where having Ryzen 5 5600 and the RTX 4090 is not going to be an issue, but if you have enough money to buy the RTX 4090, why would you buy the Ryzen 5 5600? These are both in totally different levels, and it's literally like you buy a Lambo and you end up buying cheap and bad fuel. That doesn't make any sense. If you are already spending around $2,000 or even more on a GPU, you should be getting the best CPU, the Ryzen 9 7950X3D or i9 14900K. Anything lower end wouldn't make any sense to me since you're already spending that amount of money on a GPU. But if you want to get a lower end CPU like the i7 14700K or Ryzen 7 7800X3D because you know you will be playing high demanding titles, then that's totally fine. But in my opinion, if you're already spending that amount of money on a GPU, you should be getting the best CPU in the entire market. But to answer your question, yes, you can pair the Ryzen 5 5600 with the RTX 4090. It's just not something I would ever recommend. Second question comes from Daniel, who asks, generally, are white builds better than black builds? No, white builds are not better than black builds. There's no performance difference whether you get a black build or a white build. That's just aesthetic. So if you like white more than black, then go with a white build. And if you like black more, go with a black build. I have a complete black build with no RGB because that's the aesthetic I like. But maybe you like a lot of RGB, some of it, a blue PC, perhaps. That comes down to your personal preference. But no, in terms of performance, there's no difference between colors. So do not be racist on your PC. Now this one is a very interesting question. What is the meaning of power supply 80+? So I'm guessing you are talking about the 80+ rating. You should always ignore 80+ ratings if you want the best power supply for your system, and let me explain why. 80+ ratings are supposed to tell you the level of power efficiency, however it doesn't translate to build quality, so you can actually buy an 80+ gold power supply that's absolutely trash and it's going to make your PC explode. And you can also buy an 80+ bronze power supply that's amazing quality for the type of build that you are going to buy. So I would completely ignore 80+. It doesn't mean that you will be getting better performance or a better quality power supply. So just because you see 80+ gold, do not think it's a good power supply unit. And for beginners, I understand it's actually very hard to understand the power supply market, and that's why I highly recommend you checking the PSU coolties list where they go over A tier, B tier, C tier rated power supplies unit and below, but I would not recommend you buying anything below C tier rated units for any system. And this is like car insurance basically. If you're going to buy a budget build, a C tier unit is totally fine, even for a mid-range build to be honest. And then if you're going to buy a mid-range to high-end computer, B tier to A tier rated power supplies are going to be ideal for you. Next question is more about cleaning. How to clean the inside of a PC. I've seen people talking about compressed air. My house is really dusty. If you want to clean your PC, I highly recommend compressed air. So you just open your PC and spray it inside until all of the dust is gone. I have some recommendations for you from personal experience. Do not use vacuum cleaners. They can actually damage your system, and please do not rub any component inside of the system because you can actually break some component if you do that. So my recommendation is use compressed air, and then if you see that there's a very tiny spot where you cannot get the dust out for some reason, you can use Q-tips. Another thing I recommend you cleaning if you haven't done it in a while is the CPU thermal paste. Next one is not a question, but it says best Fortnite PC. I actually made a recent video on the best 240 plus FPS 1440p gaming PC build for games like Fortnite, Valorant, and other esports shooters. So if you want to see that video, you will have it in the top right of the screen. Next question is about power supplies as well. Hey Shadow Gaming PC, should people have a bit higher wattage on the power supply than required to be safe? / which ones last a long time? In my opinion, it depends, and it depends on your budget. If you're going to buy a budget build, you don't have a lot of money to spend, I would recommend you spending the maximum amount of money possible on your gaming performance. But at the same time, you should never cheap out on the power supply. You can get a power supply that has a higher wattage to be safe if you want, but I wouldn't recommend you spending a lot of extra money, especially if that amount of money is taking away performance on your system. So for example, if the wattage needed is 550 watts, I wouldn't recommend you buying a 1000 watt power supply, but a 650 watt power supply would be ideal for you. And yes, you can do that if you want to be safe. And if you want your power supply to last a long time, you shouldn't be buying a 1600 watt power supply unless you know you're going to buy the most beefy CPU and GPU combo that you can get down the line. Just getting a 750 to 1000 watt power supply is going to be plenty of power even for new generation components, because as we've seen recently, the new GPUs are usually power efficient, so it all depends on your budget and your goals for the system. But yes, of course, if you want to feel safe, you can add 100 watts more than you need on your power supply, as long as you're not spending a ton of extra money and that's taken away from your gaming performance. Once again, the most important part on a power supply is the build quality, and as long as the build quality is fine for your type of build and it fits the wattage requirements, you are going to be fine. And with the last question, what is a good Intel and Nvidia combo for 200 to 360 plus FPS on average? My budget is around $1,000, maximum $1,000 and $1,100. I play Fortnite competitively just in case if that mattered. Now I'm guessing you're talking about $1,000 for the total build and not just for the CPU and GPU combo. So for 240 to 360 plus FPS on average, I'm guessing you're talking about 1080p resolution, by the way. If you play Fortnite competitively and your budget is around $1,000 to $1,100, I would recommend a CPU like the i5 14600KF alongside the RTX 4060 Ti. In my opinion, AMD CPUs are better in terms of price to performance, and since they are more upgradable over time. In that case, I would recommend the Ryzen 7 7700. But if you want to go with Intel and Nvidia, this is in my opinion a very solid combo for 1080p, 240 plus to 360 plus FPS in games like Fortnite competitive settings. But anyway, you have plenty of videos about PC builds on my channel, so you can watch the Fortnite PC build videos, or you can just watch the best PC builds of the month video. And if you want to get featured in the next Q&A, you will have the instructions in the video description and in the pinned comment, but it's very easy. Just go to that community post and let me know your question there and I will answer it next time. Thank you guys for watching, thank you for the support, and I will see you on the next one.